At this time, I'd like to introduce NCDA board member Ryan Wetherington, who will offer welcoming remarks and introduce our presenters.
Thank you, Emily. We live in an era of instantaneous communication, with email, websites, and social media offering economic development organizations low-cost avenues for worldwide promotion. But modern technologies can both be friend or foe when ugly headlines hit communities, companies, and organizations. We have two experts today who will share valuable guidance on tactics, tools, and techniques that comprise effective marketing and communication solutions, whether you're playing offense or defense. Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Wetherington with Armstrong Relocation. I serve on the NCDA Board of Directors and have been asked to welcome you to today's webinar and to introduce our presenters. First, there's a list of entities that make learning events like this one possible. We call them our annual sponsors, and you'll see their names on your screen right now. NCDA is grateful to them for their ongoing support for our mission round the clock and throughout the year. Thank you to these important companies and organizations. The success of economic development organizations boils down to communicating and marketing on some level. We develop well-researched strategic plans, organize our resources, adopt the latest digital tools, tap the best talent, and head confidently into the global marketplace. But unforeseen changes can adversely impact our ability to effectively engage both external and internal audiences and stakeholders. Today's webinar features two experts who have traveled the communications and marketing landscape amid both allies and adversaries. Kelly Smith is a digital marketing strategist at 365 Degree Total Marketing, a Georgia-based company that works closely with destination marketing organizations, Chamber of Commerce, and governmental agencies. After earning an MA in rhetoric and the teaching of writing from Colorado University at Denver, Kelly began injecting her passion for content strategy into every facet of digital marketing, from media development and social media marketing to email promotion and more. Chuck Norman is owner and principal of SNA Communications. Based in Cary, his company is an integrated full-service communications company providing public relations, crisis and reputation management, marketing, digital, creative, event planning, and other services. Chuck's background includes experience in PR, marketing, crisis communication, social media, branding, association management, and economic development. Thank you both to our guests for sharing insight on a topic that is crucial for economic development professionals. I'll now turn today's webinar over to Kelly to get us started.
Hello. I'm working on sharing my screen, just 1 second. All right, I hope everybody can see my screen. It's wonderful to be here today. I'm gonna take us through how to build an effective content strategy. So the way that we start with building an effective content strategy is thinking about who your audiences are. So that might be site selectors, project managers, heads of corporations, whoever that may be, or it could be another set of local business owners or regional businesses who might want to expand into your community, or other small people looking to start their businesses. So looking at just one of those people that you might be talking to, we're looking at project managers, for example. And when you're thinking about who your audience is, you really need to think about what they care about. So one of those things is always going to be money, right? They need to know what it costs. They need to know what incentives they're going to be. They need to know about your location. What is the infrastructure capabilities? Where is it located in relationship to colleges, universities, ports, airports, etc. And what does your workforce look like? So what worker skills are there? What education and training is there? What's the local legislature? And what are the technological requirements? So that's only one piece of an audience member, right? So you have your project managers who worry about all of this during their workday, but they're people too. They have families, they have hobbies, they have homes. So it gets a little out of control when you start to make a web like this about everything your audience cares about. So I like to do this neat little thing called a persona, where I make up a person in my audience that I'm going to be talking to, so that when I create my content and my messaging, I'm targeting this specific person when I'm talking to them. And it's always important to include what you think that their pain points are going to be that you can help solve, and to think about in their personal life, where might you be able to encounter them when they're maybe more relaxed or in a leisurely situation. So the next thing after you figure out who you're talking to and what their pain points are, you need to formulate goals. So you want to inform Jane Doe about your community's infrastructure offerings, your technological capabilities, your spec buildings, your spaces, and then you want to make it easy for her to connect you with the businesses that are looking to move to your location, to your state, and hopefully into your community. Once you have your goals in place, you figure out those tactics to build your strategy of how you're going to get those goals accomplished. You want to reach her exactly where she is. She's on email probably 8-9 hours per day. She's on her social media platforms in her spare time. She's on websites and digital at all times of every day, because everybody's connected digitally. You need to keep your message clear, consistent, concise. I like to call things snackable content when you make little bits of information that are helpful and interesting for your audience. And then you want to remain authentic to your community. And sometimes when it's appropriate to use hooks, taglines, branded hashtags to capture that attention and get people, allow people to follow your content using appropriate hashtags. And then you want to create shareable content. What is going to get noticed? Is it an infographic? Is it a 3D model? Is it 360 video? Is it standard video? Any of those things can be shareable content. I'm going to play this little video, and I think probably a lot of you have seen this. It was floating around last year, but if you haven't, I'm going to give you a little taste of it.
They need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Oh, no, not this one. This is Instagram now. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking.
So it goes on for another minute or so, but I'm sure some of you saw that floating around the internet. It's just this dad babbling with his daughter, with his baby, or talking to his baby like she's saying real words. And why was this one of the most shareable videos of 2019? It is not that high quality. They're barely in the frame, but it's that authenticity. It's aspirational, and it's relatable. So those are some things that can make your content shareable if you're looking for something that's going to capture the attention. Now, as somebody who mainly talks business to business, you're probably not trying to reach as large of an audience as this viral video was. So what you want to focus on instead are solving your audience's pain points. So what does that mean? Some of those pain points that we had listed on that persona, if you remember, for Jane Doe, she's having difficulty staying up to date on some of the local community offerings. So I have some examples up here of how we tackled a pain point like that with one of our clients here in Georgia with Augusta Economic Development Authority. And you can see, we're giving that snackable, concise content that is in an infographic format, easy to see, and stands out on a news feed, so that anyone following Augusta Economic Development Authority gets these updates for what's going on in the community. Then another pain point was that there are tight turnarounds and deadlines that connect businesses with the proper communities in which they can thrive and grow. So we have different ways that you can really show that to people, and that's, showing your global community how many international businesses call your community home. You can see it when you're looking at your location for logistics, your relationship to where ports are, highways are, airports are, and then just basic infrastructure in an easy, simple way to read it and take note of it. Then another pain point that was on her list was she's overwhelmed by numerous cities vying for her attention. So some of the ways that, you'd think that fewer communication points might be the right way to go, but that's actually not true. Giving these snackable pieces of content about why your destination is the best one above everybody else is what you really want to do. So Augusta received a #1 state for doing business for the 7th year in a row. Put that number right in front of somebody, they're going to remember you. Same thing, you show the work that you put in as an economic development authority and how you work with your businesses that are in your community. You show your cost of living so that people look at you and go, wow, they're #1 state for doing business. And then they also have low cost of living. That is a great place to send a business to open up shop. So moving on to social media. Is it worth my time? That's probably a really good question for a lot of people who only have 30 minutes a day to work on social media, if you're lucky. So one thing to note is that 51% of the global population is on social media. That's from a new report that Hootsuite released earlier this summer. I believe it was in July. And if you take out the ineligible population, which means children, for example, it's 65% of the internet population is using social media. So when you look at that 65% using social media, and that of that 65%, and on average, they have 8.8 social media accounts, and they're spending 99% of them are using it every single month. Yes, it's worth your time. So to which platform should I dedicate my time? It's worth my time. I don't have time to do all of them. Nobody does. This is a chart that just shows you how many monthly active users there are, but that is not the end all be all. This just shows you how many people you have the potential to reach on some of these platforms. But to really make the decision, you need to look at the demographics of each channel to see which one might work best for your audiences. The other thing to note is that, remember that 8.8 platforms per user. There is tremendous overlap. So you look at where most people are spending their time and you find out that maybe you don't have to promote anything on Twitter if 88% of them are also on Facebook and 95% are also on YouTube. You could spend your time there and reach most of the Twitter users. Or Snapchat or Reddit, again, most of them are going to be on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram as well. So that's another way that you can limit which channels you are participating in. So looking at channel by channel where you should be advertising, Facebook has a lot of users. It's one of the top ones I think you saw on that chart previously. These percentages are of the internet using population. So you have 75% of internet using women are on Facebook, and your audiences are here. If you're an EDA, probably the people you're looking at with the experience in their roles fall into these categories, and you're able to target them specifically with your messaging as well. So some of the ways that you want to utilize Facebook to the best of your ability is using videos, authentic photography, and then you definitely want to put money behind your posts. Facebook has started to limit the amount of organic exposure that posts are getting. So it's just always best to either boost your post or create ads that can then be shared across Instagram for better, to optimize your budgets better. So this is how you'll create an ad in Facebook. You can scroll down to boost a post and you can find which one you want to boost and click the button that says boost post. Or you can go up to Ad Center and it'll load this screen where you can create an ad, and it gives you a lot of different ways that you can do this. If you want to promote your page or get more website visitors, we're just going to boost a post. You click boost post. You can change your objective from automatic or reactions engagement, or if you want them to chat with you. I always leave it automatic because Facebook is pretty good at figuring out what you want. Pick a call to action button that makes sense with your content. And then you're going to create an audience. And this is how you target those users that are specifically in the groups that you want to target. So this name that you would fill in is just for you to be able to track it. You can change your ages. Say I want to target people 30 to 55. You can narrow it. And then location, I'm just going to put North Carolina. If you want to do neighboring states too, that usually doesn't make the audience too large. And then you can find detailed targeting. So this can be somebody's interests or their jobs. I'm just going to look for small business owners. And then you can see at the bottom, my audience has a potential reach of about 120,000 people. And the little gauge on the left is showing us that it's a pretty good size audience and it's not too broad or specific. So the next thing you want to do is scroll down a little further, and you can see this section that says automatic placements. And what that is where you can make sure that it's going to go to Instagram. If it's on, it'll optimize cost between platforms. And then you scroll down, you pick the duration, you pick your budget. It'll tell you about how many people you're going to reach per day. And it'll tell you exactly what you're going to spend per day and when your campaign is going to end. At the bottom here is your payment information. You can put in your credit card, and then that's how it will charge you, but it won't charge you for more than the budget that you put in. Once you're done there, you can just come down here and press boost. But if you're concerned about how your image is displaying, you can come up and preview all of these different ads that might show up. So moving on to YouTube. YouTube has one of your largest user bases, and the great thing about YouTube, the in-stream ads, which is that little 15-second spot, 30-second spot that shows up before the video somebody's trying to watch plays, and they can skip it. If they skip it, you don't usually get charged for it because they have to watch a certain percentage of your video for you to be charged for that view. So that's a good cost-effective solution if you have great video content to share. I have a sample video here.
Hi, welcome to Barrett County. I'm State Representative Terry England. I've been proud to call Barrett County my home my entire life. My family's lived in this area for over 150 years. As you know, Georgia's ranked #1 for doing business, and we actually think Barrett County is the best place in Georgia for doing business. The business climate here is second to none. We're open for business in Barrett County, and we hope that you'll sit back and relax and enjoy and understand why we would like for you to choose Barrett.
Situated in the heart of Georgia, only 45 miles outside of Metro Atlanta, Barrow County is strategically located in Georgia's Innovation Crescent, a coalition of 15 elite counties that encompass rich educational, entrepreneurial, and industrial resources.
So this video goes on for about 4 minutes. You end up making smaller cuts of it, but I just wanted to get you a feel of what type of content might be interesting to people looking for a video format. So moving on to Instagram, as you know, it was one of those platforms with fewer users on it, but you still have your audiences showing up on Instagram. And some of the content that performs really well on Instagram is video again, and people are really looking for that really beautiful content. But 90% of Instagram users are following at least one business. So it's a really great way to reach people. And the cost per 1,000 impressions is only about $5, which is, again, one of the most cost-effective solutions. When you pair that with running the ads directly between Facebook and Instagram, you find a really good sweet spot right there for how you're going to promote to your audiences on social channels. If you do want to promote directly from Instagram, you have to do it from your mobile device, which is a little bit tough, but you can log into a separate account if you have a personal, and you'll see the promote button and it'll walk you through it. The other screenshot here is just a picture of our business profile. So you can see where you have the title of your business, you have your description, and you should always have a URL. It's a very natural way for people to learn more about you. There aren't a lot of ways for people to click through on Instagram, so people will go to somebody's profile to find out more about whatever it is they're promoting. LinkedIn is the other platform I wanted to cover today. Looking at who is on LinkedIn, half of all US adults with college degrees use LinkedIn, and nearly 15% of all LinkedIn users are senior level influencers. The thing that's special about LinkedIn is that you can really target exactly who you want down to their company and job title. So it gets a little bit expensive, but that money you pay for the leads that you get through LinkedIn is very well used. You're going to have incredibly good leads coming from something like LinkedIn. So I wanted to walk you through how to build a leads ad on LinkedIn. It's a very long, tedious process. You have to go to linkedin.com/campaign manager. You can't do it from the profile page. Then you're going to create an account, name it for yourself. Then you can link your LinkedIn page. You have to be a manager of it. And once that's created, you're going to create a campaign group. It'll take you to this page. This campaign group name is also for you to be able to track that in your own platform. Then you pick your start and end date for when you want that campaign to be active. I just want this the last 2 weeks of August. Then click into your campaign group you just made and create a campaign. And there are a lot of different objectives here if you want to get more reach, if you want people to click over to your website, engage with your ads, view videos through, or you can post a job, you have website conversions, or you can do lead generation, which is what we were really talking about. So once you click into here, you're going to create another audience similarly to how you did in Facebook. So I'm going to add a location for North Carolina. Again, you can add neighboring states if you're trying to look regionally. You can look into this audiences section and it'll give you more advanced ways to target lists. These are all pretty advanced. I wouldn't recommend you necessarily use those unless you have been in LinkedIn before or have somebody to help advise you. But you can do similar things like you can on Facebook, where you can target based on age. This was just arbitrary. I know that there are people outside of that who might fit this ad. And then I look for job experience. I'm going to look for those small business owners again. This will show me what my target audience size is, how much I'm going to spend in 30 days, my approximate impressions, and the approximate leads that I'll be getting. Then I can choose if I'm going to use an image or a video. I'm just going to use a single image. This is where you set your budget. You can set lifetime or daily. I usually use daily to make sure that it doesn't spend all my budget right away. I spend $20 a day. Set my campaign dates. So I want it to run for the last 2 weeks of August. And it tells you exactly what you're going to spend. You can change your bid type. I would always leave it automated unless, again, you know what those terms are. Basically, you're getting charged by click or impression otherwise, but automated will optimize your budget for you. So before clicking next, I always want to scroll up and save that audience because LinkedIn doesn't automatically save your audience for you. And if you want to use it again in the future, this makes this process way faster. And then you save your ad. So how do you optimize your time? That's a lot of information to try to do with your 30 minutes per week that you probably have. So some of the best tips I can give you is use your content across multiple platforms where it's appropriate. Sometimes you can get something like Hootsuite or Sprout Social where you can post things across channels. I just want to make sure to caution you that you don't use content on channels that doesn't make sense. So, you know, if the photo is not beautiful, you probably don't want to post it on Instagram. But if your content is pretty nice, it works for all of the platforms. You can post them across all of them at the same time. Don't be afraid to post or share timely content on the go. If something's happening in your community, just do it right then and there so you're not wasting your desk time to get new content out the door, and share other people's content. There are people celebrating your community and your businesses that you can just share directly, and people want to see you celebrate your community. and keep your content simple and snackable. So how do I know if my content and ads are working? Remember, we're going to go back to the goals that we set, and all of your goals should have a quantifiable way to measure your success. These are just some samples of ways that you can measure to see if you're on track. And I would say you set these from the start based on what you want to see happen, and then reassess from there. So you can review basic reporting in your, this is Facebook, for example. Whoopsies. If it'll show you. So in Facebook, if you go under More Insights, it'll give you all of your page summary information. You can review who your followers are. You can review your reach. I like to look at about a month at a time because numbers tend to fluctuate throughout the month. And then you can see how your posts were performing, how your reactions, comments, and shares were doing. And then you can look at specific post performance as well. So if you click into one that you want to see how it performed, you can see everything here from the people reached to the reactions, comments, and shares to the number of link clicks that your ad received. So if you're not getting the results you want, try adjusting your budget or your targeting for your paid ads. You make sure your audience is large enough or small enough, and that you're spending enough money to get the results that you want. Make sure you're using the correct ad format for your goals. So if you want somebody to click over to your website, you want it to be pretty clear and easy for somebody to click a button to come over to your website. Make sure your copy is concise, authentic, and relevant. Use media, meaning videos or stills or 3D models or infographics, anything that's going to appeal to the correct target audience. And test different calls to action. Maybe your call to action isn't strong enough and your user doesn't know what you want them to do. And don't be afraid to shift your goals or your platform strategy. Every business's experience is different. So that concludes my portion. Here.
All right. We're just going to get our presentation up and then we'll start our side. Perfect. All right. Good afternoon, NCDA. Thanks for having us today, and thanks to Kelly and the team over at 365 for the more fun part of today's webinar. I get to talk about the less attractive crisis side today. As you heard a little bit earlier, my name is Chuck Norman, and I'm the owner of SNA Communications. We're based in the Triangle here of North Carolina, and we have about 40 professionals on staff with our agency that specializes in PR, marketing, digital, and creative for our clients throughout the U.S. We work with EDOs, municipalities, professional service firms, among others, on marketing, branding, messaging, crisis, reputation management, and a variety of other services. I spent the first 7 years of my career on staff with the 6th largest chamber in the state of North Carolina and helped market that community to the world through their economic development division. And with me today is our Vice President, Mike Trainer, who will share some case studies a little bit later. And he's also running the slide show for us. So if anything's wrong there, you can blame him. Anyway, for our portion of the webinar, we'd like to focus on how crises and reputation can be positively or negatively affected by your actions and communication strategy. So just to preface what I talk about, nothing I share with you today really replaces the need to have someone with a deep background in crisis communication to assist you in your efforts. But hopefully today will give you a 35,000-foot view of things to keep in mind or consider before you communicate and have to clean up a big expensive mess by doing or saying the wrong things at the wrong time. So, crises come in all shapes and sizes. You know, it's a big deal to somebody, maybe a small deal to another, and vice versa. But to use a current relevant topic on Zoom or any other platform, For one person, not being able to maintain the quality of their internet connection for their video conference when pitching their community to someone looking to expand or relocate can be as big a crisis as water quality issues might be to another community. Quite frankly, reputations are won or lost in a crisis. And why do we have to remember that? It's pretty simple. In the moment of crisis, we tend to forget. Our minds go blank. We say things that we don't mean or do things that we shouldn't. But you can have irreparable damage that happens from that if you don't think before you speak. So whether you win or lose, reputation is far more within your control than you really think. So crisis is the moment of choice where your destiny is determined one way or the other. You have to keep in mind that bad things happen all the time, even to good people and good organizations, so you have to be ready at a moment's notice. Everyone really gets a moment to make a decision, but what we do next is what counts. And I guarantee every one of you on this video chat that you can get through it if you take the right steps. So what you have to do is effectively manage the moment of decision. So what exactly is crisis management? It's the management of choices we make and the criteria we use to make them. We need to ask the right questions at the moment of choice. So what's the wrong question, you might ask? What we should do in some form is the wrong question, and even worse is what should we say? I think everybody gets to that situation where something goes wrong and they're like, hey, what do we say right now? Or what do we do? Why is that wrong though? We put ourselves in the mental frames of ourselves and make choices of self-preservation. Everybody's always looking to get out of this and preserve themselves, but they're not looking at the bigger picture. We end up doing things that make the problem worse. I think we've all seen it dozens of times in the media where Joe, CEO, reacts too quickly and doesn't think about how his words can make the problem worse than if he took a step back and addressed the situation with the organization in mind and not just himself. So why is what we should say bad? Just like I mentioned previously with self-preservation, we end up saying things that comfort ourselves and it doesn't really address the actual problem. The most important point I think I'd like for you to remember first is every crisis is a business problem before it's a communication problem. We can't necessarily communicate our way out of a business problem. We have to manage our way out and then communicate. Said more simply, we kind of behave our way into a situation, so we have to behave our way out of it. Think of this as an equation or a math problem for more of you analytical folks out there. Crisis response equals what we do plus what we say. If done thoughtfully, we can make it through and mitigate our exposure the best we can and possibly avoid long-term damage to the organization. Ask the right question or questions throughout the process and the solutions will make themselves apparent. So what exactly is the goal in a crisis? What we have to do is maintain or restore trust in those who matter to us most. It's always easier to maintain than restore. Think fire prevention versus firefighting in a sense. It can also be substantially more expensive to restore. When presented with a situation that needs attention, ask yourself this question. What would reasonable people appropriately expect a responsible organization to do in this situation? I want to repeat that one more time so that sinks in. What would reasonable people appropriately expect a reasonable organization to do? We all know there are plenty of unreasonable people out there and opponents to even the best solutions to the greater population. You can't engage with that small vocal minority and win. Focus on the stakeholders that provide the greatest long-term upside. So let's talk about a quick example of reasonable. Let's take an airplane crash. We've all seen those over the years. People don't expect to know the reason in the moment that the plane crashed. They don't or shouldn't expect to know the names of the people who perished in the moment. Common expectation is that every stakeholder expects that you care. What shows that you care, though, early on doesn't necessarily mean it's the same thing later in the crisis. Another important point to remember during all this is the single biggest predictor of loss of trust, of reputation's harm, and the loss of competitive advantage in a crisis is the perception that you don't care. So let's talk about the foundational strategy in a crisis. First, it's the timely demonstration that you care. And second, it's the persistent demonstration that you still care for as long as the expectation exists. That's going to be different lengths of time for every situation, and each situation is unique, so we can't really put a time frame on that right now. As another example, I'm sure you remember back in 2010 when the BP oil rig exploded. What would the right question be here? What would reasonable people appropriately expect a responsible oil extraction organization to do in this situation? Was there loss of life? Was it being considered when it comes to workers, or what's being considered when it comes to worker safety moving forward? Are there environmental concerns with, where the oil is going? Is it affecting, marine life and so on? In a situation like this, there are legal obligations with the government, but you also have to demonstrate that you have the capacity to mitigate the situation. If people don't trust you in that sense, then anything you say or do is really going to fall on deaf ears. The next part is kind of getting into your decision criteria. Silence is not golden. It's toxic for 3 reasons. I know a lot of times you may have heard over the years, just say no comment or other things. But the reason why it's toxic is it can be seen as indifferent or affirmation of guilt if you don't say anything. It allows critics or adversaries in the media to define the crisis, your motives, your actions. And finally, it changes it challenges and invites critics and opportunists to rally around public opinion against you. No matter how well crafted your response is to a crisis, there will be those that still try to bury you. By saying nothing in most cases, it's hard to recover from. Then you have to worry about what the lawyers are going to say. Almost every single time the lawyers are going to tell you, you can't say that, don't say that, don't say that. Again, I go back to what I just mentioned. Every crisis is a business problem before it's a communication problem or even a legal problem. When you're dealing with attorneys, you have to identify the things you can say, even from their perspective. In most instances, think of things like, you can say that you're aware, you can say that we're worried about those affected. In short, you can demonstrate, like I said before, that you care, even from a legal perspective, until you gather all the facts and can communicate clearly what the future looks like. So here are the best steps to take when addressing a crisis situation. Number 1, you have to acknowledge. Make sure that you express awareness of the event or issue. Next, you want to show empathy. You must express empathy if there are victims or potential victims in a situation. Third, demonstrate the values of the organization as a whole. Express what the organization cares about. Again, I go back to that word care, which is extremely important. Caring and showing that you care can mitigate a lot of your issues throughout an entire crisis response. And finally, you want to demonstrate your commitment. You want to outline the planned next steps for the organization and the potential steps for stakeholders. So what are your takeaways for this section B? It's what we like to call the first mover advantage here at SNA. Whoever is the first to define 3 things takes control: the crisis, the motives, and the actions. Control the interpretation of the event as a whole. We also like to use the terminology, the golden hour of crisis response. Incremental delays can have a greater than incremental impact. If we can show that we care in the first 45 minutes or so, we can manage the long term. We can then manage and better control the next 3 days. If not, it can turn into weeks or months, and sometimes even years of crisis and reputation management. Finally, I'd like to go over some simple questions that will help you determine how to move forward. Will those who matter to us expect us to do or say something now? Second, if we remain silent, will it be seen as indifferent to the harm the crisis is causing or as an affirmation of guilt? 3, are others speaking about us now, shaping the perception of us among those who matter to us? If the answer to any of those 3 questions is yes, respond effectively now. If the answer to all 4 is no, you have plenty of time to prepare, rehearse, and try to get our arms around the situation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mike Trainer for some case studies that may be relevant to NCEDA members, and he can take it from here.
All right, thanks, Chuck, and hello, everybody. I'm going to walk you through a few case studies that I've personally worked on over the years related to crisis situations, and kind of want to preface it by going back to something Chuck said early on, that crises come in many shapes and sizes. I think a lot of us think about a crisis situation and we think about a big oil explosion like Chuck mentioned, or a fire, or something that leads to injury, death, or situations like that. But as it relates to economic developers, I want to take you through a couple that I've worked on that I thought you would find relevant. And the theme of all of these really is the need to be out ahead of situations like this, to be communicating, and to kind of not hide behind a series of no comments, or not considering what your public image might be. So this first one is, I'm sure we're all familiar with Publix, which is making a big move here in North Carolina to grow their number of stores. And this particular location that I'm going to talk about is in West Cary. Anybody in the Triangle area may recall that the West Cary area a few years ago really was exploding in growth significantly. And most of that growth was residential growth. This particular location where Assembler, the developer, and Publix wanted to put in a location, a development, a pretty small development. Publix was the anchor store, a lot of retail and some medical. That area was originally zoned for residential by the Cary Master Plan. But as things change, the area ended up being very underserved by retail, and folks had to travel a bit of a distance to get services like this. So what ended up happening, and I'm guessing any economic developer or elected official that's watching can maybe relate to this, is that you would have thought that they were trying to put a maximum security prison into this area, right? Just with some of the reactions from local residents. It was met with a lot of opposition very early on. And before this group went out and decided to engage a firm like ours, the story had already kind of spiraled out of control. Believe it or not, the local media was covering this pretty extensively. The opposition movement was very proactive in getting out to the media, so they were kind of behind the curve. So we came in, and again, we were hired by the developer here, to be clear, not by an economic development group, but I think it's relevant for anybody in economic development or local government to work with developers to implement a strategy that will kind of avoid stuff like this happening. So we came in, and the first thing that after assessing the situation that we did was we recommended that we communicate directly with those most affected by this. So that was going to be one development in particular that kind of sat at the back end of this proposed shopping center. And I had the good fortune of moderating a series of, we called them town hall meetings, but it was a place for local residents of the HOA to come and speak directly to the developer and to Publix. We had representatives from Publix and from the developer there. And I kid you not, the first town meeting that I moderated, there was north of 55 people in the room. People had brought signs. There were people protesting outside of the HOA, or I'm sorry, the development clubhouse that we had the meeting at. And it was extremely contentious. And we really kind of, it was an eye opener to all of us. But what we did was, that first meeting was simply just to listen to everybody's concerns, hear what they were most concerned about, and then to eventually start providing some education to them. So the first piece of education was to let them know that a master plan in a town is not a promise, it's a plan. So I think there was a lot of people that were showing up with a copy of this saying you can't do this, it's zoned for residential only. I think anybody on this webinar probably knows that's not the case, but that was one of the first things that we had to do. Along with that, we kind of came out of that meeting and decided to strategize, and we started meeting with planning board members, town council members, just to kind of educate them about what we were trying to do, but in a very factually based way, showing how little retail there was in this area, how far people were having to travel, and also showing kind of disputing some of the claims that were being made by the opposition about increased traffic, increased crime, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as we headed into the next meeting, our real goal was to engage the opposition in a positive way. And there's some very simple ways to do that. And I think the biggest and most relevant one is to make them feel like they're a part of the process, make them feel like they're contributing to the development of a community like this. While it wasn't approved yet, the planning board was indicating that they were leaning in favor of it, as was the town council. So what we did from there was we ended up having a work session with the group next time. And I'm not going to, sugarcoat this and say that everybody was happy about it from there, but we eventually started to see a big kind of turn in attitude, right? I think there was like this moment of acceptance by the local residents that this is probably going to move forward. So if it is, let's all make the best of it together. And they had, as you can imagine, anybody who's been through this process, there was all sorts of different sorts of requests. I mean, crazy requests that we couldn't accommodate. But there were things like, we don't want a gas station in this development. We do not want anything with a drive-through in this development. There was, things related to our lighting and noise and whatnot. And the developer, Sembler, they're out of Florida, and they're one of Public's preferred developers. I have to give them a lot of credit because they really were genuine about that and did the best that they could to make some concessions within reason. So along the way, we continued to brief town council and planning board members. We started to do our own media relations strategy as well, making sure that the folks from Sembler and Publix were included in these stories and trying to present a theme of cooperation with the local residents. And I think there was a total of 9 town hall meetings that I moderated, and no exaggeration at all, by the last one, it was maybe 7 people in the room, very friendly. We got to know a lot of these people very well. I actually still keep in touch with one of the people on the HOA that I met through this process, and he's a friend now. So it was an eye-opener. So as it relates to economic development, certainly this is not about recruiting, large businesses with hundreds of jobs to your community, but this, if a Publix was unable to get into a location in Cary, I think that certainly has some economic development considerations. And it was a long process. It wasn't an easy process, but at the end, the town council, when they voted for it, it's on public record, they noted that it was one of the best examples they had seen of, resident business cooperation. So what I would advise any economic developer to do, any business to do is, even if you're confident that you're going to get something, approved, passed, it can be a much smoother and more positive process if you are actively engaging with the surrounding neighbors. Because some of these folks, it really butts right up to their backyard. Turned out to be a very nice development. I've been over there a number of times myself, so I think it was a win-win for everybody. So the next one I want to talk about is more on the dramatic side, right? Brunswick County, North Carolina. Anybody from, well, you're all from North Carolina, I assume. You remember 3 or 4 years ago, there was a lot of concern about contamination in the Cape Fear River. There was this relatively unknown chemical called Gen X that was being released into the Cape Fear River up in the Fayetteville area, but it was coming downstream and making its way into Brunswick County, New Hanover County, Pender County. Brunswick County is, as many of you know, it's maybe a smaller operation in terms of their governmental staff. So they did not really have the wherewithal to handle, legitimately the national media attention that they were getting, and a very, very vocal group of residents that were really dissatisfied with government's response to it. Had a lot of health concerns, certainly. There so happened to be a family that had moved to Brunswick County from Flint, Michigan in one of the most, amazing coincidences of my life. And she was an advocate there for it. So she really kind of took charge here locally and was trying to get to the bottom of this. So again, not being a county that had been accustomed to a lot of media attention like this, they had been relatively silent throughout the process. So that's when we were engaged as a PR firm to come in. And let me be clear, the primary objective of Brunswick County certainly was resident and tourist, safety, health and well-being. That was priority number 1, 2, 3, and 4. But as you might imagine, there was a lot of economic development concern around this. If you're Googling Brunswick County and you're a site selector, you're a business, and that's the first thing that comes up, that's going to give you obviously a lot of pause about coming to an area like that. So we basically took over as kind of de facto public information officer for the county. And what we did there, it was similar in a lot of ways to what I just talked about with Publix and Assembler, was let's not hide behind anything. Let's be as transparent as we can at every single turn. Let's communicate with our audiences. We're not going to sugarcoat it, right? I mean, we're not going to say this is a great thing. I mean, the county was presented with a situation that was not their fault. So their goal was or their charge was to react to that. So, we began with the simple stuff, creating statements for county managers, but we worked very, very closely with the Board of Commissioners there, the economic development. We had a lot of economic development concerns. That was, the Board of Commissioners certainly was worried about that. So we unleashed a much more broad public information campaign, regular website updates, social media posts, regular press release distribution. We made sure all the communication from not only the county staff, but the commissioners were consistent. So we're all speaking from one voice, trying to avoid any sort of unnecessary panic or anxiety, and just kind of hit them with the facts. We planned and coordinated a public meeting that had people from all imaginable organizations there. We had people from UNC Wilmington there, scientists. We had elected officials. We had town staff, the town attorney, and more than a couple hundred people came. A lot of a lot of media outlets came. And again, none of this made any of this go away, but it was very, very effective in showing residents and ideally prospective residents that the county was taking this seriously. It went on to talk about the county's eventual plans to have a reverse osmosis plant to ensure that there was clean water. So again, this was not engaged by an economic development group, but there was a lot of economic development considerations, and there was no way that we were going to be able to fix this overnight because the water had been contaminated. But I can tell you without a doubt that by communicating, by being proactive, being out there and not hiding behind anything, it went a long way. I give the town manager there, the county manager, who's since retired, a lot of credit for doing that. So just another example there of the need to communicate regularly, authentically, tell the truth. This was nothing that was their fault, and that went a long way. So I have one more that I was going to share. I don't have a slide for this just because I want to be respectful of the organization, but this was a North Carolina county economic development organization, and they had a board of directors that I would classify as dysfunctional in a lot of ways. I think that was a lot of different types of personalities. This county was a very diverse county with different types of businesses. It's a growing county, like a lot of other counties in North Carolina. So there's been a lot of evolution there. And we were brought on to help them as an economic development organization, initially how to brand themselves, how to message themselves, how to have themselves looked upon as a resource within the community. But there was a lot of folks on this particular board that didn't quite understand the role of an economic development organization. So this created what I would classify as a pretty significant internal crisis. None of this was being written about in the press, but it had a lot of factors that could affect the organization's ability to operate and in all honesty, obtain funding and whatnot. So the first step that we took formally was to do a series, I think it was about 15 interviews, which I handled, and I talked to members of the board. I talked to influential businesses within the county, large and small, diverse sets of industries, just to kind of get their opinion of the economic development organization, how it's performed, how it should perform, and what they thought the role should be. And maybe some of you all on this webinar can relate to this, but I think the most relevant thought that I took away from it was there was a clear lack of understanding amongst a lot of these people about what the appropriate role of an economic development organization is. Heard a lot of comments like you shouldn't be spending your time bringing new business in. You should be going down to the local coffee shop, the local restaurant, the local movie theater, the local mini golf course, and making sure they're okay. Sure, all really important things, right? But maybe bordering more on a Chamber of Commerce role. Not that economic developers aren't supposed to take care of businesses in there, but there was just this really, really big disconnect there. So we communicated a lot with the staff of the Economic Development Organization, and I think that was a real eye-opener to them about the need to promote yourself as well as an organization. Certainly, they were very, in my view, a very, very effective group. They had done a lot in bringing in some nice big projects. There was a lot going on, but there was just still some of these board members and or businesses that just did not see the value and had kind of a different view of what the organization should be. So I won't go into a whole lot more detail on that one, just because, again, we're keeping that one just kind of confidential, just out of respect. They're a great organization. But to Chuck's point before, there's different kinds of crises, right? I've taken you through three now. The first one was very hyper-localized, related to a neighborhood, but it kind of blew up to be a regional issue. Second one, certainly a national type news story that was spiraling out of control. And I think the efforts that the county office took along with us and quite honestly, the surrounding counties together, worked together to get that information out on a consistent basis, and that really kind of quieted things down a bit. And then this last one I just shared, I mean, that is a significant issue for a small county economic development group. I mean, I'm sure there was concerns about funding, concerns about the ability to work with their board and to work with businesses in the community. So I would just, advise anybody in any one of these issues just to kind of remember that common theme of communication is absolutely imperative. The whole no comment or trying to hide just isn't going to work today. And we talked a lot about social media early in this presentation, and that's exactly why. I mean, you just can't ever hide behind something. So that concludes my time. I think I'm going to stop my video and we're going to go to Q&A, I believe. Let me stop sharing the screen too.
I have opened the Q&A box, and I do not see any questions in the Q&A box. Give it another minute just to see if anybody put something in there. I'm going to check the chat box to make sure no one put questions in the chat box. Give it about 10 more seconds to see if anybody's going to put a question in there, and I'll bring us home. So Chuck and Kelly, thank you so much. It was a lot of really valuable information. We're waiting to see if any questions come in. Just appreciate all of your time today in preparation for today's panel. Okay, not seeing any questions. I will bring us to closing. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you to Kelly and Chuck for all the great guidance. NCDA appreciates your participation. I'd like to offer one last shout out to the annual sponsors we listed earlier. Support from all these organizations and companies is critical to everything NCDA does and is. We have additional webinars set for next week. Join us at noon on Tuesday, August 18th for a Lunch and Learn webinar called Maximizing the Return on Your Marketing Investment. It's the last in our 3-part marketing series. The following Thursday on August the 20th at 11 a.m. we'll have a discussion on COVID-19 civil immunity protections for businesses presented by Smith Anderson. Please watch your email for additional information on both of these events. Don't forget to register for our annual conference, which will be held virtually on August 26th and you can visit the NCDA website at www.nceda.org for more details about the upcoming webinar and the annual conference. Thanks again to our members and guests for being with us today. Until next time, stay safe, stay confident, and stay connected. Thank you.